turns a corner for the win.
We all started to believe, and with all that happening at once there together, I think that was such a special moment in this country.
There are NBA champions, and then there are anomalies. Teams that don't just win, they invade history. Teams that appear out of nowhere, rewrite the rules, dethrone giants, and leave behind a legacy that feels almost supernatural. And in 2019, the Toronto Raptors didn't just win a title. They engineered the greatest one-year miracle in basketball history. Think about what had to happen. They fired the coach of the year, they traded the most loyal star the franchise ever had, an MVP candidate, for a superstar who seemingly didn't even want to be there. They took a team known for heartbreak and playoff collapses and turned it into a defensive nightmare that terrorized the league. All within 1 year. They beat the MVP, they broke a dynasty, they hit the most iconic shot since Michael Jordan. They elevated a city to global superstardom. And then, just as fast as it came together, it vanished. No dynasty, no repeat, no sequel. Just one explosion of brilliance that lit the entire NBA on fire and then disappeared like it never happened. This wasn't luck. It wasn't timing. It was courage. It was sacrifice. It was the rare moment when an entire franchise, coaches, players, executives, an entire freaking country leaned into the fire at the same time. But to understand how impossible this miracle really was, you have to go back. Back to the years when Toronto had everything except answers. Because long before Kawhi Leonard showed up in a hoodie, before the shot bounced 4 times, before Giannis hit the wall, Toronto had to fight for something much more basic than a championship. Respect. Toronto wasn't born as a basketball city. It was forged out of heartbreaks, near misses, and years of being ignored. Before 2019, the Raptors lived in NBA purgatory. Too good to tank, never good enough to finish the job. A place where stars grew and then left. Vince Carter left, Tracy McGrady left, Chris Bosh left. Every time the city felt hope, the league reminded them, it's Toronto, it's Canada. Players don't stay there, nobody wants to be there. And then came 2 players who weren't chosen to lead anything, as if the Toronto Raptors were people. Kyle Lowry, too small, too fiery, too unpredictable. DeMar DeRozan, loyal to a fault, raw, determined, a worker. Together, they didn't just win games. They rebuilt an entire culture. They gave the city a reason to believe again. Toronto started climbing. 48 wins, 49 wins, 51 wins, 56, 59. The Raptors became a regular season machine. Disciplined, deep, connected. And as Jurassic Park grew from a fun gimmick into a global spectacle, you could feel the city transforming. Basketball wasn't just alive in Toronto. It was rising. And the Raptors finally had a little bit of respect. But of course, every story of hope meets a villain. And this villain had the cruel timing of a Greek tragedy. There is losing, and then there is being destroyed by destiny. For 3 straight postseasons, Toronto ran into LeBron James. And LeBron didn't just beat them. He claimed ownership of their franchise. He decimated them. In fact, so great was his advantage that I truly believe the Raptors were beaten before they'd even stepped on the court with LeBron James. He turned difficult shots into casual exercises. He banked in running fadeaways just because he was bored. He swept them with a smile. And in 2018, when LeBron walked off the court after hitting a dagger that silenced the entire country of Canada, the world coined a new word, LeBronto. The Raptors weren't chokers, but their daddy was LeBron James. The 59-win Raptors, the best team in franchise history, were swept like an afterthought. A franchise that spent years building hope was now trapped in the shadow of the one man they just couldn't escape. And that's when Masai Ujiri realized something terrifying. As good as these Raptors were, they would never win like this. Not with this roster, not with this coaching staff, and not with this ceiling. Something had to break. And he broke everything in one of the most courageous and riskiest moves that any GM has ever done in NBA history. You gotta remember, this was a 59-win team with a Coach of the Year and MVP candidate. Most franchises protect their stars. Most front offices avoid risk. Most GMs fear the fallout of becoming a villain. But Masai Ujiri, he had no fear. He had only one goal, which was to win a championship for the city of Toronto and the country of Canada, no matter the cost. So, in one offseason, he shocked the league. After firing Dwayne Casey, the reigning Coach of the Year, he then traded DeMar DeRozan, the most loyal star Toronto ever had, the heartbeat of the city, an MVP candidate, for a man who didn't speak, didn't smile, and seemingly didn't want to be there. Kawhi Leonard. The move wasn't just controversial, it was viewed as borderline reckless. Kawhi had just melted down publicly in San Antonio. He was accused of quitting, faking injuries, disappearing on his teammates. Rumors said he wanted LA and only LA. Many believed he wouldn't even suit up in Toronto. And man, as someone who lives in Canada, I totally remember the absolute and utter confusion that was surrounding him. But Masai knew what he was doing. He wasn't trading for comfort. He traded for ceilings. And he knew if Kawhi was healthy, if Kawhi was focused, and if Kawhi was still Kawhi, Toronto had a player who could do the one thing DeRozan never could. Go toe-to-toe with LeBron, Durant, Giannis, and win. It was the biggest gamble in modern NBA history. And quietly, it was about to create a monster. This wasn't just a superstar swap. This became a metamorphosis. Kawhi gave the Raptors something they'd never had. A force of nature on both ends of the floor. A silent, robotic, unflappable hunter. But he wasn't alone. Lowry, now in the back half of his prime, played like a general who'd survived every war. And because there was less onus on him to score, he was able to do what he did best. But also remember, they had young Pascal Siakam. Imagine that. Siakam exploded into a transition nightmare. He became the Siakam we know today. A blur of speed and length that teams couldn't solve. Then there was a young undrafted man named Fred VanVleet, overlooked and became the league's most annoying defender and one of its coldest shooters under pressure. He got given a finals MVP vote by Hubie Brown for his defense on Steph Curry. Think about that. Then Marc Gasol arrived mid-season, a previous MVP candidate, a genius disguised as a slow plodding center. And Nick Nurse, a rookie head coach, turned Toronto into a defensive laboratory. Box and one, triangle and two, matchup zones, shifting traps, rotations that looked like synchronized warfare. Remember the box and one on Curry? I hadn't seen that since high school. This team didn't talk trash, they didn't dance, they didn't care about highlights. They suffocated you, they eroded your will, they hunted you until you quit. Toronto wasn't just good, they were terrifying. And then the playoffs arrived. The Philadelphia 76ers at the time weren't a matchup. They were an obstacle built by a mad scientist. Embiid, Simmons, Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris. A team with size, star power, swagger, and chaos. The series was a heavyweight fight. Bodies collided, runs swung like punches. The Raptors struggled to score, Philly threw haymakers, but Kawhi Leonard refused to die. Games where Toronto needed 30, he gave 39. Games where they needed 40, he gave 45. Games where they needed a freaking miracle, he created one. By Game 7, everything Toronto built, every sacrifice, every risk, every criticism, came down to a single possession. Final seconds, tie game. Kawhi takes the ball, drives right, fades into the corner. A shot launched over two defenders, a moment suspended in time. The ball hits the rim. 1 bounce, 2, 3, 4. 20,000 fans frozen. Kawhi crouched like a statue, bodies locked in disbelief. And then the drop. The roar that followed wasn't just a celebration. It was release. It was validation. It was destiny whispering, "You're not done yet. I've got you." But the next challenge wasn't destiny. It was destruction. The moment that shot fell for Kawhi, the Raptors entered a different universe. But little did they know, the hardest part hadn't even begun. Because waiting for them was the MVP, the future of the NBA, a one-man wrecking crew on a rampage, a guy who had earned the nickname, the Greek Freak, Giannis Antetokounmpo. And to reach the finals, Toronto would have to break him. Giannis Antetokounmpo was inevitable. A 7-foot locomotive with unlimited battery life, a force on a mission to dominate the league. A 7-foot point guard that could go to coast in 3 strides. The Bucks went up 2-0 instantly. Toronto looked too slow, too hesitant, too outmatched. Analysts declared the series over. But then Nick Nurse made the adjustment that changed the NBA forever. He built the wall and made Kawhi Leonard the primary defender on Giannis. 3 bodies waiting, 2 more behind, driving lanes closed, angles erased, space suffocated. And with Kawhi as the primary assignment, suddenly the unstoppable became human. Giannis crashed into bodies, lost the ball, forced shots, frustrated, shaking his head, looking confused for the first time all season. Meanwhile, Toronto's role players transformed. Van Fleet, cold as ice. Siakam, relentless. Lowry, orchestrating chaos. Gasol anchoring the middle with surgical precision. The Raptors didn't just win, they stole Milwaukee's soul. 4 straight victories, 4 straight statements, 4 straight reminders that this wasn't a Cinderella story. This was a takeover. Toronto was going to the NBA Finals. But standing in their way were the Golden State Warriors, who weren't just a team, they were myth, a basketball superweapon, a dynasty built on movement, shooting, genius, and intimidation. Even with Kevin Durant in and out of the lineup, they still had Curry, Klay, and Draymond. And yet, Toronto did something nobody expected. They were better, smarter, tougher, more connected. Game after game, the Raptors controlled the tempo. Their defense shredded Golden State's rhythm. Kawhi played like the best player in the world. Yes, ahead of LeBron, Durant, Curry. Because in 2019, nobody on earth played basketball like him. KD then tried to return and ruptured his Achilles. Klay gave everything, then tore his ACL in Game 6, or Game 5, I believe. Critics say injuries gave Toronto the title. But the truth? The Raptors were leading almost every game. The Warriors needed perfect play just to stay alive. Toronto's depth suffocated them. Their defense broke their rhythm. Their execution was flawless. Of course, yes, if Kevin Durant is at full health and Klay doesn't tear his ACL, who knows? But unfortunately, that's sports. And the Raptors had the biggest injury risk in Kawhi Leonard, so we can't take away what they did. And to that point, in the final moments of Game 6, in the final game ever at Oracle Arena, Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam each dropped 26. Van Vliet hit dagger after dagger, and Kawhi delivered the kill shot. The Raptors were champions, not because destiny chose them, but because they had earned it. Sadly though, Most championships, especially like this, lead to dynasties or new eras, or at least a few more years of contention. Not this one. Kawhi Leonard, the best player in the world that season, the guy who took Toronto to a new height, left immediately. And just like that, the once contending team fell away. But in truth, the miracle didn't evaporate. It just started showing itself in different forms. It crystallized. Lowry, now still in the league, a 20-year plus career, certainly a Hall of Famer, a great legacy cemented by the Raptors championship run. Pascal Siakam, a max player, NBA superstar who is the best offensive player on his team. But if it weren't for that Raps title run, he wouldn't have become as well known as he is today. And what about Fred VanVleet, who is a max player in Houston, who before injury was going to be the point guard on a championship contending team, from undrafted to unstoppable. And it was that Raptors run that showed it. Nick Nurse, one of the best coaches in the NBA. Masai Ujiri, a legend forever. A visionary. A GM whose gamble changed sports. Toronto didn't build a dynasty. They built a moment. A moment so powerful it elevated a franchise, a city, and an entire country to heights nobody thought possible, truthfully. Sitting here in Canada, I can absolutely tell you that that is true. The Raptors didn't cheat history. They ambushed it. They created the greatest one-year transformation ever seen in major American sports, truthfully. And you know the craziest part? It'll never happen again.